In the beginning, it was probably because my mother got tired of me copping her camera every time her back was turned and taking my own pictures with them, which was my dog or my cat or my silly kid brother. So she bought me, around my 8th birthday, presented me with a little plastic camera called, I'll never forget it, called a Univex. It took an odd-sized roll of film, and I was the happiest kid in Wichita, Kansas at the time. From that point on, I used my own camera and took whatever got in front of me.
How about in high school where you started making money?
Yeah, big time. I was never much of an athlete myself. Well, I was too lazy, actually. But everybody on the track team, football team, and any other team liked pictures of themselves. So I started hanging around the finish line and getting the winners and losers and started selling them to the kids, which was my first commercial venture. And it started me on the wrong road, really. I should have been a stockbroker, but I ended up being a photographer. I carried the camera every place. Then I had a little 35 Argus, and wherever there was a photo opportunity, I took it. It ruined a lot of film. The photo finishers in Flint, Michigan were happy because every spare bit I got, I went to them. And until my father fixed me up a darkroom in a basement. He saw that I was interested in something, and I might make something of myself, like get out of his hair, make a living, So he made me a dark room, and from that point on, I did my own processing. That was junior high. Yeah, junior high school. And went into the service. Not much photographic opportunity there. I was in the engine room, fire room, below decks, The Chicago Institute of Design, which was an offshoot of the Bauhaus in Weimar, Germany. And some of the same people. Well, it was Moholy-Nagy who started it in Weimar, brought it to the United States. And I spent 5 years actually, because I stayed an extra year. I wanted to study special projects with Harry Callahan. And
when did you start shooting for Downbeat?
Yeah, it was around that time when I was in college. I went to see Ned Williams at Downbeat, and excuse me, and he suggested that I take pictures because the ones that he saw looked good, and he says, and you bring them by, and if I like them, I run them. Typical, So, but actually, Jack Tracy, who was the editor at the time, gave me 21 pages in 57, I think, of pictures that I'd taken at Newport Jazz Festival, which kind of started the jazz thing as far as making, album covers and getting assignments from Playboy or the other people, anybody that used jazz photographs, because at that time, Downbeat, as well as most of the other magazines, would get publicity releases. You get the things that studio shots that were handed out by the music companies, and everything was more or less like an ad for the company that the artist was working for. And they started using original stuff and getting, I thought, much better material, Yeah, I had to get used to the current style of shooting because I turned in an assignment. I used to string for Time magazine in Chicago bureau, And the guy called me, and the editor called me and gave me the assignment, and it was a headshot, like Time Magazine used in those days. You know, they'd run a story, one headshot of the executive, whoever he was. So he says, yeah, shoot me a lot of stuff. So I go in, and I shot this guy 3 rolls of film, 36 exposures per roll. And I thought I had expended quite a bit of film in this guy. Anyway, I take it in, I give the editor the 3 proof sheets, and he says, where's my stuff? I says, what do you mean? He says, there's only 3 sheets here. Where's my stuff? And that's when I learned that if you're shooting for time or life, you better do it by the pound because it's not by the end. They know they're only going to use 1 shot, but he wants to have a lot of stuff to choose from in that 1 shot. But you know, how many expressions can you get from one guy who doesn't have any to begin with? And how many angles can you shoot him from, you know? So
then your style of photography is you feel you've got to
be selective. Yeah, my feeling is I'm selective. If the assignment is up to me, but you can't do that. You can't be your own editor, right? Because then the guys at the desk wouldn't have anything to do. But I go for a certain shot, a certain feel of what I'm trying to get. And I know when I've got it, usually. Sometimes I don't. But usually I know when I've got it. And I quit shooting, enjoy the music, or I start looking for another picture. But that's not the way a lot of people shoot. I guess they're playing to the editors in a sense because they know that they want a lot. Next time I did an assignment for this particular editor, Time Magazine, I turned in 15 proof sheets. It didn't matter to me because they pay the expenses. They were paying for the film and the processing and all that. And my day rate was the same, and it didn't take much longer to do it. You know, you got motors. So.
So when you're shooting for Downbeat now, go back to Downbeat.
In my work for Downbeat, I was fortunate enough to have an art director who was very sympathetic to the way I felt, because he felt much the same way, as far as being original and not being tied into a certain way of shooting or a certain style. So we collaborated on a lot of things. We did some crazy things that he wanted to do and some crazy things that I wanted to do. Like one of the things was cutting photograph in strips this way and then slicing it up the other way and juxtapose. It just turned out to be real nice. And it was kind of groundbreaking at the time for Jazz Magazine anyway, you know. And I did some photograms on my own because at Institute of Design we had gotten a lot of working. First semester you don't have a camera there. They don't let you use a camera. And so everything is like Man Ray kind of stuff, you know, objects over paper or over film. And we did one Downbeat cover for the film issue that way. You know, we did a lot of experimentation there. And I don't think the magazine really got much recognition for it. I did some reticulation. Imagine this, reticulation and solarization on a Downbeat cover with Stan Getz. I don't know if Getz appreciated it or not, but it hadn't been done before, that kind of a magazine. And it was good to have that kind of freedom. Of course, that kind of freedom didn't last long. Money ran out of magazine, and the publisher, the printer, ended up owning the magazine for the publishing bills. And he was a real dinosaur. He's the guy that didn't want to run too many blacks on the cover because he didn't want to lose his readership in Atlanta. And Don DeMichael, Don DeMichael, who was the editor, he says, hell, he's only got one white guy down there reading the magazine. He said, give him up. But anyway, it lasted for about a year. We did some very good work there. My introduction to Playboy was Vince Tejuri, who was a photo editor there, would at the time they were actually it was when they were first starting the magazine. Hugh Hefner, Arthur Paul, and Vince was in the background, and they had a place behind the lab that I was using at the time. It was Mike Shea's lab, and Art Paul and Hefner had a place behind that. It was like a coach house in Chicago near North Side. And one time they couldn't get in to their place. They came up, Mike went back to help them break into their own place. So we became associated, you know. And it's associated in the sense that they knew us, you know. It wasn't a big buddy-buddy kind of thing. But when a few years later, when the magazine was successful, and Hef started putting on Penthouse, Playboy Penthouse on television, local in Chicago. And I used to go up, and they would allow me to go up and take photographs. I wasn't doing it for them, but they would have whatever celebrities were in town. I go by, plenty of light, you know, great shooting there, you know. So I would show Vince some of the things. Actually, Don Bronstein was shooting for them at the time. Don was there, good cat, cool cat, you know. And so Vince would look at my stuff. Sometimes he would use it or he would make suggestions. And a few years after that, I started covering Newport for the magazine. They pay expenses and things. But in the beginning, nobody pays expenses. You know, you go out and if you get me a decent, if you give me something I like, then we might buy it at our price, you know. But that's the nature of the business. The way I really started shooting for the jazz things, for magazines, actually I was shooting them for myself.
Don't tap the table.
Bad habit. Actually, the way I started shooting for the magazines, in essence, I was shooting for myself. I would take my camera wherever I went. I had a Leica at the time, which was quiet and efficient. And it was easy to get it. Just put it on your coat and you go in, you know. Because I love the music and I love photography. And this was a way of combining them, you know. And in the early days when the film was slow, ASA 80 was top speed, double X or something it was called. You know. And you have no idea what we used to do to get a little speed out of this stuff. Mercury fumes, Dectol 1:1, grain about this size. But anything to get an image. We were, you know, and we were young and dumb and whatever. We didn't know that we couldn't do it. So a lot of these things we did anyway. I think that's a secret. Young people don't know what they can't do, so they do it. But that's the way I started, and pretty soon the pictures got better, and I did become known in some of the clubs. The management, there's a natural animosity between a photographer who does not bring any money into a club and the club owners who are looking for somebody to bring money into the club. So they don't give you any breaks unless they're going to get something out of it. You know, I used to hang around Blue Note for years in Chicago. Frank Holtzbein was not a good buddy of mine. You know, I'd go in and I'd pay for my drinks like everybody else until I had an assignment to shoot Basie's band there. And that was different than I usually go in with the camera. Nobody even knows I'm there, man. You know, I take the pictures, no flash. I set up flash units all over the place. That was for Playboy. And Frank says, "Oh, Playboy," you know, you can envision good publicity coming through the magazine or local ads and things. So he let me do it. And after that, of course, he hated me for that because he was really upset. After the third shot, he was through, man. He says, "Get him out of here." The people loved it because they thought it was a party, and his flashes going on. And you know, 5,000 watts of strobes at each corner of the bandstand, and every time one of them went off, the whole screen had a minor heart attack, you know. But after that, he would give me a little leeway because he thought I was important. You know, unfortunately, that's the way the world works. But generally, when I go on an assignment, they don't know that I'm there, and they don't know that I'm taking the pictures. That includes the artist as well as the customers there, and hopefully the management. It's just the way I work, and I take my time and do it, and sometimes I'm successful getting what I want, and sometimes I'm not. But I try to do better than my mentor, Harry Callahan. Harry said if he got one good picture a year, one picture a year that satisfied me, I'm happy. And I said, he said, Harry, it takes more than that to satisfy me. You know, give me two. I had, being based in Chicago, bands would come through and I would contact players in the band or some of the individuals, and I had a good relationship with a lot of them. Some of them, for me, it works two ways. Some of the people I had a very close relationship, and as far as being friends with, other than just a photographer subject relationship. Cannonball Adderley was one. The group Lambert, Hendricks, and Ross, all three of them we were pretty close. The people in Shearing's group, Paul Desmond was a very close friend. Rubeck I knew very well.
Ellington, you got into a lot.
The band, I knew everybody in Duke's band. I knew Duke, but Duke was not the kind that had hanging out buddies, drinking buddies. You just knew him; he was the boss. But I knew guys in his band well. Art Blakey, guys in Miles' band. I knew Miles. I wasn't that close with Miles. But he was another guy that you don't hang out with, unless, I don't know who hung out with Miles. But anyway, the guys in the band, and we were close, and that way they kept me, they would let me know if Duke is recording over at Universal Thursday at 2:30, okay. And, or anything special happening that I should know about. There's going to be a party and Duke is showing up at midnight or something, or whatever. So I was kind of in the know with some of the groups. And other things, great things would be happening around me, and I didn't know anything about it because I didn't know anybody that was connected with the situation. Miles Davis, who kind of started with the Beboppers, who Charlie Parker was his, Dizzy Gillespie were his idols, and he went on to become idolized by everybody since then, up to the fusion people and the rock people of the 80s and 90s when he finally died. I first met Miles Davis in Chicago in 1953. He had just come out of either drug rehab or he had had a problem on the West Coast with the police or something. Anyway, when he got to Chicago, he didn't have he didn't have a horn, and he didn't have much of anything else. Evidently, he escaped the West Coast under some pressure. He had a wife. He called her his wife at the time. And some of the guys in Chicago, Gene Ammons, and I forget the others, but they were local jazz men, got him a gig at a place a small place on the South Side in Chicago. Borrowed a horn. I talked to Miles at that time. I was still just out of college, and he was a very friendly guy. He was having problems getting located with his wife because she was a white girl, and he was getting some pressure from somebody, I don't know. Everybody, that's all you need anyway in those days. But Mike was, Miles was a sweet-tempered guy. And I think that that's the way he always was. I think the crusty appearance that he had later in his career and later in his life was not because he was really that kind of a guy, but I think it was a protective thing. Not that he was really sweet, but he had an even temper. He wasn't a bad guy or a mean guy, or when he turned his back on the audience that he was showing any contempt for the audience. I think that he just wanted to let the other people in the band blow it, because he would walk off the stand sometimes, you know, and
Tell us about these pictures.
this was Miles backstage at the Civic Opera House in Chicago, and this was a bad night at Black Rock for me. It was a Jazz at the Philharmonic presentation, and Norman Granz, another gentleman who had no great love for photographers, some photographer had him teed off that night. I don't know, maybe it was all of us, who knows. But he instructed the light men to put heavy red gels over everything. all of the arc lights had heavy gels over them. So it was pretty hard shooting out front. You know, the photographers were walking around gnashing their teeth, and they were wondering how long he was going to keep them on, because it was inconceivable he'd run the whole show this way, right? Well, they were right. He later changed them to heavy blue gels. But anyway, I went backstage and started working the dressing room with the acts that hadn't come on yet. And Miles was one of the guys warming up. And I mentioned to him what was going on, and he says, "Well, you can't tell what Norman's going to do." And he was right. But I got some good things backstage that night. In fact, it was one of the nicest backstage shootings I got. I got Oscar Peterson, and I got the Modern Jazz Quartet that night, and Dinah Washington, all because of Norman Grantz's, that night. This is one of Dinah there that was taken that night. That night, Norman had the lights covered up. I even got some out front in spite of Norman. This is Dinah Washington that night with, you can cut this in later,
Yeah.
with that heavy red gel. I knew how to open it up, and Tri-X works pretty well with that, you know, fast speed, give it a little, this red sensitive film anyway. There's ways to get around all of these things. All of these things are just obstacles that are thrown in the way. Our natural enemies are club owners and editors, and we just have to fight this, don't we? Don't say that way. Art directors are good. This is the classic Miles Davis quintet with Bill Evans and Cannonball Adderley, John Coltrane, and sextet. I missed somebody. Jimmy Cobb's not on there. Anyway, I tried. But the drummer, he's way back there someplace.
Wow, that's a great picture.
And Thelonious Monk, another one of my favorites. Thelonious Monk is, I thought this was strange because of all the things you associate Thelonious with, ice cream is not one of them. But that was an interesting, a friend of mine had an interview with him, and we asked him the day before what he would like for refreshments. And he says, oranges, vodka, and ice cream. So she went out and loaded up on oranges, vodka, and ice cream. She said, "Sure you don't want anything else?" No. As soon as he got there, he ate the ice cream, and then he took the oranges and he started peeling them. He wouldn't let anybody else peel them. He peeled the oranges, and he sat down and he started eating the oranges and drinking and sipping the vodka. And she went, this is in the kitchen. She took him into the living room. She sat down in a chair and she set him on the sofa, and she asked him his first question, her first question. And I don't think he answered it. And she looked at him uncomfortably, and she asked him the question again, and he leaned back on the sofa and reclined and went to sleep. And she says, "What do I do now?" And he says, no, he didn't say anything. And I said, "Well, why don't you give him a little time? Maybe he'll wake up." Well, he woke up, and he didn't really wake up. He just turned over so his back was to her. But Thelonious is, to me, this is essence of Thelonious Monk, and it says Thelonious. I mean, anybody knowing him, that's got to be Thelonious with that hat. I had a 20 by 24 on the wall of the Birdhouse in Chicago, a nightclub. And the next time Thelonious came to town, I took him by. I wanted to get his reaction to this. And he goes up to it, and he says, "Shit, I could be anybody." To him, it was anybody, you know. But anybody that knows Thelonious, that was Thelonious. I don't care what he says. What does he know?
Did you sell that to anybody?
And it's actually, I sold it to Joachim Brent in Germany. He used it in his calendar, jazz calendar that year, which was 1960, I think, 61.
That's the picture that I'm first aware of you.
This one?
Uh-huh.
No kidding.
Uh-huh.
Where, did you see it in that calendar?
I saw it somewhere.
Yeah.
And I can't remember where I saw it, and I said,
Yeah.
that is just an amazing.
Because
photo."
he's the first. He's the
And I
first.
knew who it was immediately.
Yeah, that's
Absolutely.
most people that know Thelonious do know. You know, a lot of young people don't even know what a Thelonious is. But yeah, and it said it to me. You know, but I was sort of when he says, "Shh, that could be anybody." You know, poor guy. He was a great guy. I like that. He came down to Mexico City, and I was down there during the Olympics, and they had what they call the Cultural Olympics, and they had a lot of jazz groups down there, and he was one of the ones that was there. Very popular down there. In fact, jazz is popular in Mexico. Mexicans like, it can be good jazz, it can be bad jazz. It doesn't matter, you know. But they got a lot of good stuff that year, you know. I remember the first trip I ever took to Mexico City. A friend of mine used to write for Downbeat. Was going to take me out, and he takes me to this nightclub in the Latin American Tower in Mexico City. I don't know, 36th floor or something. And we get off. We're going to this very fabulous jazz club, you know. And they got a decent group playing. Chico Farrell was there then, decent band. And my friend he sits down and he apologizes. He says, "I know you're coming from America, that this is not much for you, but for us down here, this is great." And I had to tell him, "Are you kidding? You should see the dungeons that the jazz place in up there, you know." But he had nothing to apologize for that night, man. Yeah, I liked their attitude about it. They like Muddy Waters too. I used to live down the street from his club in Chicago on 35th Street. And I'm sorry to say I never went into his club. He had special nights. I just wasn't into blues at the time, you know. And I should have been, I guess. I had a special relationship with Paul Desmond. His music really touched me, really reached me. I liked his sound, and I kind of just tolerated Dave Brubeck. But Desmond, you know, I'm kind of like that guy that used to cut out all the Charlie Parker solos. Everybody else, he would just, you know, just kick out, and I was almost like that with him. But he was a really good writer if he had taken the time to write. He wrote 2 or 3 short things, short stories, and some liner notes, but he was just didn't have the what do you call it, discipline, self-discipline to sit down and do it, because asked him why he wasn't a leader. He says, "Oh, Dave does that much better than I do." He says, "I don't figures, money, and all that stuff. I don't want to have to do that." We used to hang out a lot. He was usually looking for a girl, and I was looking for the girls that he passed over. One lady, dear to my heart, is Sarah Vaughan. Her voice and as a subject to work with, she was one of the first subjects that I made contact with personally in my early career. I was still in college, still at Institute of Design, and she was booked into Chicago Theater with on her first national tour as a single. Dave Garroway, who was a disc jockey in Chicago, later went to the Today Show, I think it was her biggest fan, and he really contributed to her popularity in the Midwest because he played her constantly every night on the 1160 Club. 1160 mean midnight. Anyway, I called her up when she was in town and told her I was working for a college newspaper, which hadn't materialized yet, but I was taking pictures for it whenever it did. And she says, "Come on down." In those days, they did that, you know. And she let me into her dressing room, and this is the result of that. I didn't have much time. I went in real quick, and I took maybe 3 exposures on sheet film with a speed graphic, and got out of there. But it was and I've shot her many times since then. Here at Newport, I was at her 50th anniversary birthday party, and is that right? Anniversary birthday? Anyway. So I was associated with her all through her career, and it was amazing just to hear her voice in the beginning, and then later how it developed into such a rich, and I don't know. It just amazes me that I had that ability.
Go back to the Dave Garroway and the incident.
Oh yeah. When she was on the Chicago Theater introduction on that show, Dave Garroway preceded her on stage, scattering rose petals before her, all the way to the microphone. You know, he had the very florid kind of thing as he introduced her. And some people heard about it and didn't like it. Some, I hate to use the term, but redneck or bigots. And after about the 3rd or 4th night there, they sat down front and they threw tomatoes at her in an attempt to humiliate somebody. But it said more about them than it did about the artist. But other than that unfortunate incident, it was everybody loved her, and me more than ever, because she took it very well as she can take things like that, and she only got better. Billie Holiday. It's sad to say this isn't one of her last appearances. This was the year before she died, and she wasn't in such good shape. She was ill. She still had the drug habit, and but she was still a great lady as far as singing is concerned. Duke Ellington and Mahalia Jackson did a fantastic performance at Newport. Mahalia would not sing jazz. She would not sing secular music. She would only sing gospel music or sacred music. Duke Ellington wrote Black, Brown, and Beige Come Sunday section, which is part of his sacred music. And Mahalia agreed to sing it if it was Sunday. So it was a Saturday night concert that ran over midnight, technically a Sunday, all right? So Mahalia agreed to do it. And it started to rain just before this part of the concert. And Mahalia sang, Didn't It Rain? I've got this mixed up. My memory says she sang Didn't It Rain? And I think she was supposed to do From the Come Sunday Suite. But when she started singing Didn't It Rain, because this I remember from my head, not from anything I read, it quit raining. Or at least it stopped raining for that part of the song, or that part of the night. And everybody was amazed by that. Maybe Mahalia does have this special connection with whoever's up there. But then you cut into the movie, the picture. It shows very forcefully, because that's the way I wanted it. Mahalia dominating the print, and Duke Ellington on the side, as she is singing his lyrics to this song. How did I get that mixed up? Anyway, we got what else we got here? Ella Fitzgerald,
Ella.
Mellow Ella. Everybody. No, well, that's a gospel lady. She doesn't have a name. Yeah. Yeah. Ella Fitzgerald. Ella Fitzgerald had a reputation of being very sweet, and she was. But she also knew what she wanted. She was no patsy. She was no pushover. And I have heard her on stage at Newport chew out her rhythm section for not keeping the right rhythm. And she did it out of professionalism. It wasn't out of bitchiness. The guys that work with her know that, and the people out front still love her. She's easy to get along with, shy, genuinely shy, and I never went into her dressing room. And I don't know if it would have been possible or not, but I just never got the nerve to ask her. And it was out of consideration for the kind of lady she was. I never went into Nina Simone's dressing room either, but that was out of fear. Because I saw her eject a couple of guys from her with cameras, you know. But as sassy Sarah Vaughan, I always felt safe to ask her. If she didn't want me to ask, she'd say, get out. Or Dinah Washington, she was very straightforward. She was hard to work with, but easy to be around, you know, because there was always something happening, always some action around Dinah, you know. This was Gospel Sunday, and at Newport, and they had a lot of gospel. They had a lot of gospel singers, and all kinds of religious music. Now I have a character defect that keeps me from appreciating gospel music too much. So I'm walking around backstage to do some still lifes on tubas or, you know, that kind of a thing. In fact, I was working on a tuba at this time. And I ran out of film. I went over to change film. And when I come back to work on my tubas, this lady's sitting there. And I couldn't pass it up. I had to take this. It was a perfect composition. It was, everything just worked. It gave a reason for the tubas and everything else. Don't know her name, and didn't matter. I just love this shot.
Have you ever published it?
It was published in, do you need to know?
No, just curious.
Yeah, it was published in a couple of places. First time it was published in Black Photographers Annual back in the 70s. And then I think it was this published in one of the portfolios? Yeah. Everything in my life hasn't been jazz. Some have been blues, and some have been news, and everything. One of the charges I got was taking photographs of Edith Piaf, who was a legendary singer, and who, in my time, everybody knew about her. And I was always fascinated with her stuff. I had a girlfriend who, when Miss Piaf came to the United States on tour, who was a Piaf nut also, and she had to meet this woman. And I said, she's not going to see you. You don't even speak French. She says, I speak enough. Anyway, she made an arrangement she talked to Edith Piaf, and she said, you want to go with me? I said, are you kidding? Sure, I want to go with you. So I went with her, and she talked with Edith Piaf, I don't know, 2-3 hours that night, after a show that Piaf had done at the Chicago Theater. And I took photographs of her in not typical situation at the kitchen table, you know, and or drinking coffee in the living room, just talking and rapping and showing expressions that you never see her do on stage. You know, I mean, on stage she always has this one projection, you know, the sparrow. So that was a revelation as to the Air Force.
Yeah.
Or they had that suicide thing. They would go to her, people who were suicide prone, they would go to a performance of hers and then go and off themselves. They were doing the same thing with Billie Holiday's music around that same time, you know. And of course, you know, who knows about that. Capitol Records did a great ad when Edith Piaf died, because they published that stuff over here, or released it over here. It was a clear picture of the sky with clouds in it and a small bird up in the corner. And at the bottom it said, the sparrow has flown. I put that on the wall for a while. You know? No, I was born in Texas, and my folks got out of there as fast as they could, being very intelligent people. I grew up, kind of grew up in Kansas until I was around 11 or 12. And folks moved to Michigan, and I graduated high school there and went into the service.
You got a when did you get your first camera?
In Kansas, around 8 years old I was. And my mother used to complain about me using her camera all the time. I think she was complaining about the fingerprints on the lens or something. You know, at that time I wasn't too, you know, peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and stuff. So she wanted me to, actually she wanted me to take pictures because she was interested in it. She tried to get me interested in the things that she hadn't been able to do or that she thought would be good for me. She wanted me to learn how to skate. She wanted me to be graceful and learn how to dance, you know, and she wanted me to be interested in arts and things, and you know, so that's where the photography came in. Never learned how to dance, can't to this day. The skates I broke down and made a skate scooter out of. I never learned how to skate either. But photography hung on, you know, and it was just a fascination. I deviated for a while. I thought I wanted to be a painter. I took painting, and I thought I loved music so much that I wanted to make music, and I took music. My mother started me on piano, and later I took saxophone lessons when I was in New York and a teenager. But none of that took. You know, I can do chopsticks on the piano, but you know. And don't ask me what I can do on the saxophone. Nothing. I mean.
What about the camera? Your mom, she promoted that?
Very much, yeah. She made it possible for me to earn money by doing a little odd jobs for her, so I'd have enough money to buy film and get it processed. In those days, it wasn't that expensive, but she encouraged me all the way in anything that she thought that I wanted to do, if it made sense. And I always made sense.
Okay, how about Chicago now? Where you're in Chicago and the club scene's happening?
School.
Yeah. Well, it just so happened that Institute of Design was on Dearborn, North Dearborn Street, and one block from North Clark Street. The Shores of Beautiful Skid Row, we used to call it. They had some jazz clubs on North Clark, and we would hang out in these clubs. They call us the college kids, you know, go in, buy a beer, hang on to it all night, you know. And of course, I always took my camera. Anita O'Day was in one of the clubs there, the High Hat, High Note. I think it was the High Note Club. It was anyway. I laid the same number on her that I did on Sarah, and she says, "Don't worry about it." She said, "I got your tables down front, me and two of my friends, two of my buddies there," and she told the manager, "Take care of these boys, give them anything they want." She's been my darling since and forever, you know. But that was a good place. That was one of the experimental places where we, with the low light and slow film things. The club on the club scene on the south side was a little different. It was mostly between South Parkway and Cottage Grove on 63rd Street, and it was fantastic in those days. And we were talking about 50s. You could walk from one. You could walk that. It must have been about 10, 12 blocks. You could walk that distance and never go more than a half a block without running into some small club or some large club where there was music being played, live music. You know, usually a trio, now and then just a piano, and larger groups, quintets. You know, bebop was very much in play at the time. Ahmad Jamal used to play in one of the pictures here. I have of him at the Pershing Lounge. He was there for months, you know, and sometimes you'd go in there and be empty. Other times it'd be full. But he was there every night, and I don't imagine they paid him too much money. But that's the caliber of Gene Ammons. They used to have a battle of the bands between Von Freeman, Gene Ammons, and any other saxophone player that had nerve enough to show up. Saturday and Sunday weekends, and basement places. They had a big circle bar at 63rd and Cottage Grove. We used to call it a racetrack. I have an idea why they called it that, but there's always a band in the center of this big oval bar, and it was just unbelievable how much music was there, and it was all good. And the problem with it was, the problem with me is at that age, I was walking through this as if it was going to be that way forever. You know, if I had known it was history, if I was known that I could be documenting this that this was all going to be over in a couple of years, you know, I would have been shooting like crazy, you know. Same thing with all of the old bluesmen. You know, I bemoan the fact that I don't have any blues people here, but all of the old bluesmen of the time who were nearing retirement age or dying age were in Chicago, and I should have been shooting them. You know, I could fill this table up with stuff that I didn't shoot, as well as what I did shoot. But you know, that's the way you are when you're young. You think things are going to be that way forever, and you think you're going to live forever. But and the big bands coming through, we would always get the names. You know, pretty soon they quit playing the sleazy clubs, and they start playing the universities. University of Chicago, that Duke Ellington there was the University of Chicago, and playing downtown at the concert halls, at Orchestra Hall, and some of the other places. Changes. It's a lot of the things taken in TV studios, which before TV they didn't have a place for excuse me, visual presentation of bands. So, the March of Time. Give me another clue.
How about,
Yusef Lateef, how's that? Yusef Lateef, Cannonball Adderley, George Shearing, Hank Mobley, Max Roach, Thelonious Monk, Quincy Jones. Did I say George Shearing? Art Blakey, Maynard Ferguson, Lester Young, Cat Anderson, George Benson, Jimmy Smith. And I'm looking at pictures now. When I run out of pictures to look at, I'm going to have to start Muddy Waters,